Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about the fact that I am reading a book from every single country in the world. It's been a while since I've done a full update video for this channel, and it's been even longer since I've talked about my favourite books that I've read so far for this challenge. I think currently I've hit around 80 books for this challenge so far, and the last time that I actually updated you on my favourites for this was like well over a year ago, and so that has changed considerably. So today I thought I would do a top 10 favourite books that I have read for my Reading Around the World challenge. Some of these books have genuinely become my favourite books, and they've been on my favourites lists in this year and last year, but I really wanted to just have a dedicated place for people who are also doing this challenge and wondering where to start and wondering what my thoughts are. And these are potentially amazing options for you to read if you are doing this challenge as well, or if you're just interested in reading from these countries or from these authors. I will go through and explain my top 10 favourites. This was actually incredibly hard to narrow down. I had about 15 that I just could not figure out, and I was trying to get it down to a 10 because 10 just feels like a much neater option. So I was kind of trying to focus on some of the ones that I haven't talked about as much, but some of the 5-star books that I read still at the beginning of the challenge I will also still be mentioning in this video because I couldn't leave them out. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to fill in some more of my reading journal that I'm very excited to do. I kind of like doing this in like a little sit down session. It's really fun to kind of sit down and get all my equipment out and then fill out a bunch of books at the same time. So while I'm talking about my top 10 books for my reading challenge, I'm going to be filling out my reading passport journal as well, which, by the way, I made these. If you do want one, there's always a link in the description. It's a really fun way to track your challenge in a physical way, and I do really appreciate the support if you did want to buy your own journal. And also, before we jump into the list, I wanted to shout out the Reading Around the World book club, which I'm sure you all know already if you've watched this channel even a little bit, because every single month I host a book club and we choose a different country and a different book to read from. I host it over on Fable. It's completely free to join. And we're actually currently voting for the country that we're going to be doing in March. We have a few different options, so you can go and click and join. There is a few different books on this top 10 list that I've read with the book club, which just makes it so much more fun to do as well. Reading alongside other people doing this challenge, hearing everyone's opinions, really motivating to carry on with this challenge. It's just one of my favourite ways to keep up with reading books from all around the world. So I think let's just jump in. At this point, it's impossible to rank these books, so these are going to be in no particular order. But the first book that I want to talk about is The Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector. The country that I read it for is for Brazil. This is a book that has definitely grown on me, and the process of reading it was incredibly unique to me because I, at first glance, found it quite incomprehensible. The first few pages of this book, I was really worried that I just wasn't going to understand what was going on at all. And then by the end of this book, I felt like I had more of a handle on it. And then talking about this book with other people has brought me a lot of joy because there is so much here. It is a really thin little book that is just packed full and so layered. I honestly think that you could just find so much within this book, and every person would find something else within it. So this book is kind of hard to describe what it's about, but it's basically about a man, and he is an author writing a story about a girl, and at points it's kind of unclear whether this girl exists or if he's invented her. He thinks that she is small and pathetic and living a life that she doesn't even understand how bad and how pathetic she is. He, as the author, is the only one who can kind of truly see her and understand her. And that's all I'll tell you about this book because it's a journey. Honestly, it's one of those books. The easiest way I can describe it is that instead of it building up to something and starting small, it starts huge and then narrows down to a point by the end. So if you're finding this confusing, especially at the very beginning, I would say kind of let it wash over you in a way, or just keep reading it until it starts to make sense, and then you can kind of go back, and it does make more sense at the end, but it is pretty complicated, but honestly, ultimately a 5-star read for me, and I really, really enjoyed this one. As we all know, reading around the world is amazing for being able to travel without actually leaving your home. But if you are also a fan of traveling as I am, then I'm so pleased to introduce today's sponsor, which is Level 8. There's no better way to kick off your adventures than upgrading your luggage, and Level 8 have been kind enough to send me one of their new check-in luggages. This is the Voyager check-in luggage, and I have to tell you, I've never had fancier luggage in my life. I love this really cool handle, meaning that you get extra space in the luggage because of how wide it is. And even though it's absolutely huge, it's so incredibly light. Like, I can move it so easily. It has a very cool locking system and is compartmentalized inside as well with different compression sections. I cannot wait to take a trip soon and use this luggage. The best part is that Level 8 are currently offering 8% off all of their check-in luggage. So if you are going traveling anytime soon, then you can go and click the link in the description to get 8% off all of their carry-on luggage. And of course, thank you so much Level 8 for sponsoring this video. I keep having to move the camera around because the light is insane. The next book that I want to talk about for this top 10 books for reading around the world is Moth Smoke. So this is the book that we read for Pakistan, and this was one of the ones that we read as part of the book club. So this book, I was so surprised by how much I really, really enjoyed this one. I've heard quite a lot about this author. They have another book, I think it's actually slightly more famous than this one, Exit West maybe, but that one is not actually set in Pakistan. And so for this challenge that I do books that are by an author who is from that country, and also they have to be set in that country. It is a very strange story, but it's kind of the perfect mix of the type of book that I want to be reading for this challenge. It's deeply set within the country. I'm learning about what it's like to live there, like in the summer of like 1998. But also it's got a lot of plot, a lot of character development. It's really well written. It was gripping. I really, really enjoyed this one. This book, you are kind of following a man who is crashing out of his life. He has lost his job. He has no money. Like, his electricity has been shut off. He's just trying to survive. And then he gets involved in a drug scene in his city. And then also he starts getting involved with his best friend's wife. It's a very messy situation, but I really enjoyed this book. And also there is like a way that it's written in the sense of you have all of these different scenes that are happening to the main character, and then you're kind of zooming out and it's like set in this courtroom, almost this like moral courtroom where different characters in the story are talking about the main character and like whether what he did was correct and right. I just really, really love this book. And like I said, it was the perfect mix of everything I wanted in a Reading Around the World challenge book. Not only was I learning, I also just actually really enjoyed the process of reading this book. So that one is Moth Smoke. Next up, I want to talk about one of the most recent ones that I read for the Reading Around the World challenge. And it's another book club book, and it is Chess Story by Stefan Zweig. So this book I read for the country of Austria, and this book is another really short little slim one, and I really, really loved it. It's only about 80 pages. It took me not long at all to read, and I was just left like thinking, what was this about? In this book, you're following a man, an unnamed passenger. He's not very like present in the story, the narrator of this book, but he is on this ship that is traveling to Buenos Aires, and on this ship he figures out that there is a very famous chess master on board, and he's trying to devise a way to get this chess player who is like very against playing other like amateur. He won't do like any public appearances without like a lot of money. He's trying to find a way to make a game happen on this ship. Firstly, being like quite removed from the narrator of this story, you know, no personal details about this narrator. Like at one point, like in one sentence, he mentions that he has a wife and he's with his wife on the ship, and it's just like he's glossed over because it's not important at all. The actual importance of this story is kind of about this chess player, but also about another passenger on the ship and his backstory and what happens to him. And a lot of the backdrop of this story is about what happened in Austria with the Nazis and people who were taken as like prisoners. I think only about like 5 of us so far have finished the book club book for this month in the Fable. So if you have read this book, then talk about it with me. Like, I really want to know your thoughts on it. Did you like it? Did you not like it? I think it's a very quick and like almost easy read because of how gripping it really is, but like also it's difficult read in another way because it's very much like you finish the book and you're like, what was that about? And I loved how it forced me to sit and really think by the end of this book. And the thing that I've come up with in this book, if you're interested in my thoughts, is that each different character is actually a chess piece on a chessboard, and you have like the king and the queen and the pawns and like the different maneuvers about how the game of chess would play. You might not agree with me in that, like as that take, but like I'd be interested to know your take as well. Next up, I want to talk about a book that I actually still don't own, which is crazy. I need to own this book because it's incredible, and it is the only sci-fi on this list, and it's the book that I read for China, which is The Three Body Problem. This book is very incredible, and I know that this is like a very well-known book for good reason, but I would say it's a little bit intimidating, I think, to like jump in, especially if you're new to sci-fi. I would say if you really enjoy historical fiction but you don't enjoy sci-fi, I think you still really would enjoy this book. Or if you still quite like longer like philosophical books, then I think you will still enjoy this one, because although it is a sci-fi, it is so deeply set during like the Chinese Cultural Revolution and then like more modern day China as well. But most of the ideas that this book is talking about is like taking these small ideas about scientific advancement and like human morality and then projecting them and kind of pushing them as far as they can go in a technical sense, like in terms of the science, but also like in a philosophical sense, and like what that would do to people's minds and morals, and like how would we appear to like an external kind of interloper onto the planet. I just found this book so fascinating, but it is a long book that is quite full of like very heavy kind of info dumpy sections, or like there's long portions of the book that are like dealing with, it feels like the minutiae of the world, really digs in deep. But ultimately I do think all of that is really worth it in the end. It's just, I do think probably not a book for everyone, but if it's a book for you, you're gonna love it. Next up, we have a book from Ireland. So the book that I read for Ireland, which I read recently, was Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, who is, I think, one of my new favourite authors. I've read 3 or maybe 4 books by Claire Keegan now, and I absolutely love them. They have this real like quiet power to them, and I don't understand how she does so much within these short little books, because all of the books I've read from her are very short, but they immediately make you feel part of the world. You feel deeply for the characters, you feel really moved, and like she just does so much with so little. This book in particular is set over a week during Christmas in the 80s in this very small Irish town, and you are following a coal merchant. Is he coal merchant or like coal and timber merchant? And he's kind of going around, and it's a busy week before Christmas. Everybody is trying to get all of their coal and timber in. Because of his place in the town, he kind of has a unique perspective on a lot of things that go on, and he uncovers some kind of dark secret that is happening within the town, and it's basically about his moral quandary about what to do about this. Do you keep the peace? Do you move on with your life? Do you make sure that you and your own family are kind of safe and secure, or do you like step in and say something? Just an absolutely beautiful book, and I absolutely highly recommend this one and also all of the other Claire Keegan books because they are similarly amazingly written. I think one of my favourite Irish authors of all time. Next up, I want to talk about a book that I read for Egypt, and I read this quite a long time ago, but it has really stuck with me, and that is Women at Point Zero. This book is another one that is short and kind of punchy and like to the point, but very beautiful and quite haunting as well. This is a story all about a woman, and she has grown up in Cairo and has basically suffered throughout her life and has ended up as a prostitute. And basically when we meet her in the story, she is in prison and going to be executed for the crime of killing a pimp. So then a journalist goes to interview her on the last day of her life, and she tells the story about how she got into this situation. I think this one has stuck with me for so long because lots of the older, like more slightly historical books, and especially for like different parts of the world, especially Africa and a lot of the Middle East, it's harder to find books by women about women that are translated and that have been like widely published. So when I found this one, I was like it was like a sigh of relief, and it just has really stuck with me since. I think it's beautifully written, it's really haunting, and it's a sad story that feels like it's just kind of universal but also incredibly specific to the experiences of like this woman, this character in this book. So That is Woman at Point Zero. Next up, we have a slightly happier book, and it's the book that I actually read for Finland, and that is This Summer Book by Tove Jansson. And this is the author actually of the Moomin series. So if you've ever read a Moomin book, this is the same author, and this is their adult book. And it is kind of not autobiographical, but like semi-biographical about like her niece and her own grandmother, because this is a story all about one summer where people are living on this tiny little island, and this is a very real place in this area of Finland where there are just these small islands and you get around by boat. It is a man and his young daughter, and then I think it's the man's mother, so like the child's grandmother, and it is just beautiful. It's not a plot heavy story in any way. You're not following it in a linear fashion either. It's like very much more all about little vignettes of the summer that they're spending together, and then like kind of these very sweet and like sometimes very profound conversations that are going on between this young girl and her grandmother. And it's set on this island that has a character all of its own, and it's kind of like this like brutal but like very beautiful place. And I just loved how much love there was in this story, like between these characters who are so full of personality as well, like this kind of young girl and this like grumpier like grandmother, but they're not like even as reductive as that. It's just there's so much depth, and I loved this book in particular. It kind of reads like little short stories, even though it's not technically short stories. But yeah, absolutely love this one. This is The Summer Book. Next up, I want to talk about one of my, I think, gonna be all-time favourite books, something that has really stuck with me and I can't actually wait to reread it, and that book is Stillborn, which I read for Mexico. You've probably heard me talk about this book a little bit because I read this last year. It was easily like in my top books of the year. This is a story about two friends who at the beginning of the book have both made the decision not to have children. One friend goes as far as to get a sterilization surgery, and then the other woman decides in the end actually she does want to be a mother, and then she goes through the process of trying to get pregnant. And the book is about decision and like how that decision will affect each of their lives in very different ways. But also at the heart of this book, it really is about their friendship and how beautiful that friendship truly is. It's one of those books that you just feel like I felt when I read it, that it was written specifically for me and the things that I've been struggling with and thinking about in terms of my life and my own decision felt so beautifully and elegantly described in this book. And obviously it is very, very sad, but I think that actually the bits that I would think would be the sad bits in this book, like although very sad, weren't the bits that really actually made me cry, because the bits that actually make me cry are kind of like the friendship bits and like things like pulling through disasters together. And it's just one of those books that I would just always recommend to everyone, and I really love it. But beware, going in, not the easiest book to read. Next up is a book that I thought I owned but I cannot find for some reason, but it is the book that I read for Senegal, and that is So Long a Letter. This is a book that is also very short. It is basically a letter, and it is sent from a woman who is dealing with the death of her husband, but her husband had actually moved on and married somebody else. But in Senegal, it is traditional that you would isolate for, I think, is it 40 days and nights? So she is taking this time after her husband has died to write to her friend and like reflect on her own life and her marriage, and also kind of her friend's life. And they've made very different decisions in terms of how to like exist as a woman in Senegal at this time, in terms of their relationships and their career, and they're in different places in their life. So again, it was so interesting for me to read because I really felt like I learned a lot. And it's also another book about female friendship that I also love. It won't take you too long to read. It's really stayed with me, and I loved how it was written. I think it'll teach you a lot, and it's honestly just one of those books that I will always recommend, especially for this challenge, but also just in general, just to read this book. And then the final book that I want to talk about, book number 10, is Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead, and I read this for Poland. This book has begun a new love affair with this author that I'm going to be reading so many more of her books, because this book in particular I absolutely loved. Even though this book actually took me so long to read, and normally when I'm loving a book I read it very quickly, this book just like took me a long time to get through, and I'm grateful for that because it made me slow down. Something about it, like it just resists the ability just to like speed through it. But basically in this book you are following this older woman, and she lives in this very rural village in Poland. And basically when lots of the people who live there kind of go away for the winter, she like walks around and looks after their properties and looks after the grounds. She is deeply connected to like the wildlife and the nature in her surrounding area. She spends a lot of her time thinking about the poems of William Blake and also the stars in terms of horoscope. And basically this book kicks off with one of her neighbours dying, and she has to go with her other neighbour to help move the body. And this kind of kicks off a investigation. I would really hesitate to call this a murder mystery story in any way, but there is definitely a mysterious element to the centre of this story that is very satisfying and very fun to read. But a lot of this book is a lot more contemplative about this woman and her life, and just she is a character who is trying to always like speak for those who are voiceless, and whether that is the animals or people in society that have been forgotten, and she feels very, very strongly about this. And I loved her. She was absolutely insane as a character and I loved her so much. And this one is just like another one of my all-time favourite books. And another one I can't wait to reread because I feel like I would get so much more, especially knowing how the book pans out. I feel like I would love to reread this one from the beginning and really kind of like dive into the story. But yeah, another one that I absolutely love. And that is all 10 of the books that I wanted to talk about for this video. It has been so much fun to talk about how amazing these books are together. I think that there is a theme I'm seeing with my favourite books. I like things that are short and sharp and punchy, but also that are kind of like a little bit philosophical and reflective, that have female friendships, that focus on nature, that are like lots of the themes that I think that I really resonate with, that I enjoy a lot in books, and there's a lot of that here as well. But please let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, then please let me know your thoughts. And if you have not read any of these, please let me know which ones sound the most interesting to you and like where you're going to start as well, because I would love to know which ones call out to you from this selection. And also let me know if you have your very own reading passport and if you're gonna buy yourself one as a little gift for doing the difficult work of reading around the world and reading a book from every single country. I think you deserve a little present for yourself. It's really fun doing this journal, and I've kind of customized all the beginning of this. I did a whole video where I actually was customizing the beginning of this book as well, so you can go and watch that video. But overall, just thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe because that really helps me out, and go and watch all of my other videos, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!